A lot of people made fun of me, at the very beginning because they thought it was a screwy idea. I'd go in the restaurant and people say, well, you had a train wreck lately? Well, in a small town, it's everybody's business. I just sunk my teeth into this idea, and I never gave up.
The railroads transport billions of dollars of goods across North America every year. At any moment, day or night, countless trains are on the move across a 140,000-mile network of tracks, bridges, switches, and rail yards. But how can railroads ensure that this complex system stays operational and safe for use? How do they respond to derailments or natural disasters? To keep their trains and schedules on track, railroads rely on specialized contractors that are uniquely equipped and qualified to maintain the right-of-way or respond to railroad emergencies. Railroad contractors are a vital component of our rail system. Since the 1960s, one company, Hulcher Services, has redefined the role of the railroad contractor, with innovations and service offerings previously unknown to the industry. While the company is renowned for its around-the-clock train derailment response, Hulcher performs thousands of other projects each year, ranging from load transfers to environmental services to major track maintenance and renovations. When natural disasters strike, railroads rely on Hulcher's fleet of heavy equipment and hundreds of employees to mobilize and restore their networks to full operation. For many in the railroad industry, the name Hulcher means trust, confidence, and assurance in disaster response and railroad services. Few would be surprised at the suggestion that Hulcher Services is an iconic force in the industry. What most people don't know, however, is that the genesis for this legendary company was a simple, impulsive notion of one young man in Virden, Illinois, an opportunistic farmer's son with a screwy idea named Glenn Hulcher.
I grew up on a farm, working as a small child on tractors and things of that nature. My dad was in the buried cable business. He started out back in the 40s for AT&T, or Ma Bell as we would call it. And then as they went from that to microwave towers and no longer buried the big cable, then he went into pipeline business. That's the way I grew up, with heavy equipment and in the construction business and farming.
Virden, Illinois, about 25 miles south of Springfield, was originally settled as an area of agriculture. This small city of a few thousand sits atop a large seam of coal, and after the 1850s, when the Jacksonville and Southeastern Railway was completed, it became possible to mine Virden coal and ship it. From 1926 through 1930, America's famous Route 66 passed through this little community. In 1940s and 50s America, a handshake, or your word, was as good as a contract. Honor of country and family ran deep, and a simple, hard-working life was one of integrity. This was the way of life in that small farming community in central Illinois. This was Virden, where young Glenn Hulcher was raised.
I'd put my crops in the spring, and then as soon as I had it in the ground and up a little bit, I'd take off to the construction jobs for my dad, and I would operate as heavy equipment. You know, I was a you-go. You go here, you go there, you do this, you do that. And I grew up that way, which gave me a really diverse background, you know, and experience.
One day in 1963, the morning unfolded in its usual way, with Glenn's routine on the farm providing no indication that this day would prove to change the future, not only for him, but for the entire railroad industry.
I would get the equipment running in the farm and things of that nature, and about mid-morning, I would run by the truck stop. And they were used to me coming in, so the waitress would have a cup of coffee when she saw me poured and lay the paper out in front of me, the local newspaper. And I would always turn to the page of Van Landers. And I'm sitting on the opposite side of the coffee bar, and this gentleman drives up in this pickup truck, and he sits down on the other side of me, being a total stranger, and I turned to him and I said, "Good morning." I said, "I see you work for the railroad." He said, "How'd you know I work for a railroad?" And I said, "You've got high rail wheels on your pickup truck." And he laughed, and he said, "Well, I guess that gave me away, didn't it?" I picked up my coffee cup and I walked around behind the counter over next to him, stuck my hand out and shook hands. I said, "I'm Glenn Hulcher," and he said, "I'm Sam Hanges." And that man changed my life. And I said, "Well, my father has heavy equipment, and I operate heavy equipment and farm." And he said, "I attend meetings around the country." And he said, "I'm responsible for calling heavy equipment to train derailments that we have on a railroad. You know, in these meetings, they talk about bulldozers with winches on them." And he said, "None of my contractors have winches on their bulldozers. How come my other contractors don't have winches?" I said, "Well, simple. You're not in the mountains. You're not in the swamps. You're not in the timberland. And you're not in the oil fields. You're in cornfields and soybean fields that your railroad runs through." I said, "Well, it'd be useless for contractors around here to have a winch. But we're in the pipeline business, so we have winches on our Caterpillars." He said, "How many bulldozers would you bring me if I need some bulldozers?" I said, "All you want." "Well, we only own 2. That's all we had." Anyway, you know, whatever. If a man wants a blue suit, you only got brown suits, turn the blue light on. You know, whatever he wants, you know, that's what we'll do. Time went by, a couple, 3 months, and my dad calls me on the telephone. It's in the early morning hours, like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And he said, "I got a guy that just called in here. His name is Sam Hanges from the Chicago Northwestern Railroad. And he's ordered 4 bulldozers. And if we can supply 5, he'll take 5. He's got a big train wreck just north of us. And he said he talked to you."
The thought never occurred to the elder Hulcher and his son to tell the railroad man they couldn't deliver what he needed. They called their friends and neighbors to help, and then they called the State Highway Patrol to lead their convoy to the derailment.
So I drove up to the site in the pickup, and I'm right behind the state patrolman. And the heavy equipment and trucks are all in a caravan behind me. And I noticed this pickup truck that's set up in front of me, maybe half a mile. So I drove on up to this guy. And at this time, you know, he was out of his pickup truck, and he was running back and forth like a wild man, back and forth on the railroad crossing. And just throwing his arms in the air, and it just looked like he'd lost his mind. And I got out of the pickup truck, and as I walked over to him, he said, "Those SOBs in Chicago said you would not come. And I told him you would." And he said, "I bet him $100 that you would come." And he said, "Here you are, and those suckers in Chicago going to pay that money to me." Yeah, it was Sam, the man I'd met in the truck stop.